Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on The Kim B. Davis Show. Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have Dr. Saudia Twine. She is a marriage therapist, podcast host of Eros meets Agape. Good evening, Dr. Saudia Twine. How are you?
I am well, Kimberly. How are you?
I am great on this hot, steamy day in Michigan.
I
It's
love it.
90 degrees. I love it too. So, speaking of the weather, we have a hot topic to talk about. I want to talk about avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, people pleasing, and learning to put ourselves first. And let me tell you where I sort of came up with this because I was having a conversation with some friends of mine, and we were talking about how we have watched women all our lives work, 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 take care of people in the family, take care of their children, do all these things, and then get sick and die. And not as if taking care of others and taking care of your children and working is not admirable. One of the things that we talked about was when did they take care of themselves? And so tonight, I really want to delve into this topic of learning how to put our needs first. You know, when you're on an airplane, and I love the instruction, it says, okay, in the event of a emergency, when the air mask drop down, you put it on yourself first, not your child, not your spouse, not the person next to you, but to you. But for so many of us, we put the mask on everyone else while we are gasping for oxygen. So I will give you the floor. Will you first define what avoidant attachment issues are, and then anxious attachment issues are?
Okay. So, if I'm being completely honest, that is a very dense topic.
Okay.
And because it's so dense, it's very hard to chew because you really have to grasp what attachment is. And sounds like, okay, we all know what attachment is, but in essence, to understand it theoretically, you have to have that mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
to break it down to the smallest common denominator, attachment is something that is given to you pretty much from birth,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gifted to you from your primary caregiver. So most people, that's their mom, but it's the person who mainly raised you. So if I'm talking to a client, then I'll say, if you were younger, you were running outside playing and you hurt yourself, or if you were playing, having a great time, and now you're hungry, when you run into the house, who do you go to for help, for assistance, for whatever it is that you need? That's generally going to be your primary caregiver because that is the person that you trust as being the one who can honestly help you, provide your needs, care for you. But in essence, attachment is with you from the cradle to the grave. From the time you're here to the time that you leave, you are experiencing your attachment style, which is evidenced through your attachment beliefs, which you portray in any type of attachment form of relationship. Most people know attachment from a mother child relationship, but the next trajectory is your romantic relationship. So, in essence, you in a relationship with Bay or your spouse, that is someone that you're going to have an attachment relationship with. And in essence, there are two types, or should I say categories:
Mm-hmm.
secure attachment and insecure attachment. Secure attachment means that I don't have any problem whatsoever loving other people or being loved. I can have conflict and I don't see any form of rejection or abandonment. I don't think that the relationship is in jeopardy of being lost. I just see it as we are communicating our differences, hearing one another. I feel heard and understood. and validated in my conversation. Even though we might not agree, even though we might even be yelling, I still feel as if this person really hears me and gets me. And so, because of that, I'm comfortable with intimacy, emotional intimacy. I can talk about my feelings and it's not bothersome. It's not, causing me to cringe inside. I can think of emotional words with ease. In the same sense, if my boo wants to go off and have a boys weekend, or if he wants to go play golf for the day and I wanted to instead have a day for us that is planned, I won't take it personally. I don't see it as an issue. So I'm okay with being alone, that separateness that comes with that. So healthily, a secure person can flow very well with intimacy, but also very well in being by themselves. However, when we have insecure attachment, it's quite different. And there are three forms of insecure attachment. So secure attachment stands alone, stands by itself, whereas insecure attachment, it is the majority of the population. Most people did not grow up in an environment where love was really expressed or communicated or evident. So, because of that, there is a struggle with being able to be vulnerable with our emotions or be able to express how we're feeling. And if I'm being just completely transparent, many times we'll tell boys, suck it up, be a man, don't cry. That is not healthily teaching them how to emote, express themselves emotionally, to process those thoughts, those feelings, to have a healthy conversation. So if I can't really do that from childhood, it's going to be exceptionally difficult as an adult. So with those three forms of insecure attachment, we have anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and then another category which is called disorganized fearful. Disorganized fearful attachment, we'll kind of put that one on the back burner. It is not the majority of what people experience when it comes to attachment issues. It is a smaller percentage of the population. And in essence, it is a combination of both avoidant as well as anxious attachment. And it is a result of abuse, maltreatment, neglect, or trauma. And because of any of those or a combination of those, someone will experience disorganized or fearful attachment. Now, when we look to anxious and avoidant attachment, because I know here I said it was dense and I'm already getting lengthy in the
Okay.
conversation, but to explain it, to paint a picture for your audience, anxious attachment is mostly identified by women. These are individuals who are really great at loving other people. At 70% of the population are women that are anxious attachment. They, unfortunately, if we look at it from a me versus another person perspective, anxious people in essence have a lower view of themselves and a higher view of other people, and it's because growing up in childhood there was an error in the message of love that was communicated. So in essence, growing up, I saw that my primary caregiver could love me on Tuesday but then not be available for me on Thursday, maybe emotionally. Then on Saturday maybe they were available emotionally, but maybe I didn't know that because they were physically not available. Or on Tuesday, the following week, weren't talking to me. So there was a lot of inconsistency. So the only consistency that an anxious person identified with growing up was inconsistency. That was the one thing that they were able to get consistently throughout their childhood. So it sends mixed messages, and a child can only figure out as much with content as they possibly can with the undeveloped brain. So what's going to happen? I'm going to come up with my own answers, and the only answer that children come up with is, I must be the problem. So I'm the only one that's consistent in this whole thing. And if they're able to love me at some point, but not on others, I must be doing something wrong. And we see that a lot. If you think about kids that, their parents divorced, they'll say, is this something that I did? Because kids are at that frame, or should I say phase of life, where it's there's, we call it concentric, where they are thinking of themselves, and it's not that they purposely do it, that's just where the brain has developed to at that point. So as a child, when your attachment beliefs are formed, it's formed about age 1.5. So that's that period of life where you're learning the difference between me and another person, but you still contribute a lot of things to be yourself. So Most females end up having anxious attachment. We also see that because there is sometimes not a father figure in the home. And because of that, they develop a sense of rejection or abandonment because of that absence, which also is another contributor for how they may have developed anxious attachment. Whereas the flip side to that is avoidant attachment. And in essence, avoidant attachment just simply means we didn't show or express love in my household growing up. So because of that, I do not know how to communicate my feelings emotionally. And if you think about it, men that are in a relationship as an adult, because 70% of the population that are avoidant are men. So if we didn't learn that growing up, now here I am as an adult, and my partner is wanting me to express myself, and they're thinking I am purposefully not communicating. But it's not that I'm doing it purposefully. It's just that I don't have the vocabulary that you're asking of me.
Mhm.
And in essence, they're called upon to speak in an area where they don't have knowledge of. So it's very overwhelming, and it causes them to shut down. So that's the four types of attachment that exist. And those are the statistics on as far as men or women and dividing up within those categories. Did that answer your question?
That did answer my question. And, while you were talking, I was thinking about some people I know, and I was like, "Ooh, they got anxious attachment issues. Other people have avoidant issues." But now I want to go over to people pleasers. So this is the definition that I came up with through my research. It said people pleasers are people who try very hard to make others happy, even at their own expense of time and resources. Insecurities and low self esteem usually play a role. How do these two types of behaviors lead to people pleasing as a troublesome behavior for some people, or do they both? I could see it for anxious attachment. I don't necessarily know about avoidant.
So avoidance are a different breed.
Right.
They're, I mean, in all honesty, an avoidant person, you wouldn't, everyone knows these individuals. So let's just kind of throw out some natural identifiers. Your avoidants are going to be your individuals that succeed. They do very well and they receive awards and promotions at work. They are very high achievers in school. To me, it's quite ingenious because if I didn't get accolades growing up, attaboys, great job, I love you, you're awesome. If I didn't get that type of validation in my household, we figure out a way to make it work. So, oh, okay, mom and dad don't do that, but my teacher does. Yeah, I'm going over here and I'm going to have that need met because it is not a desire, it is an innate need. We were basically made to be relational.
Hmm.
And this type of love is kind of inbred within us. So when we can't get it from our primary caregiver, we find a way to do so. So an avoidant person, these are your people that grow up to be very successful. And it's because they learn to find success in another format. But in the same sense, they also learn to be able to kind of really shut off their emotions. People will call them an iceberg, that they can flip, turn their emotions on and off. And they can, because what they learned growing up was, we don't do this emotion thing here. Why are you crying? Why are you wanting love? Why are you wanting hugs and kisses? So they learn to turn it off. And it's just so buried deep within them that now in a relationship, someone is asking it of them. No, I don't really do that. So going back to your question, the anxious person, as far as being a people pleaser, they don't mean to do it, but in a way, they're trying to fill a hole that is insatiable.
Hmm.
Because if you've ever seen someone who, let's just say they have had issues growing up with being fed. If
Hmm.
you've ever been around a child like that, they store food because they're trying to prepare for a possible, should I say, experience where that could happen again and they won't be caught off guard. The anxious person is that becomes a people pleaser is the same type. They fear rejection, they fear abandonment. So a way to control for that, to be ahead of the game, so to speak, whereas I'm now going to do things that I believe you desire and that you want, that is going to make you want me. And if you want me, then I will always be in your presence or desired or loved by you. Therefore, you won't reject me or you won't abandon me. So they're trying to really preempt the feeling of not being loved or being rejected. And they recognize it, but the fear of not having the love is greater than the fear of being without that person. So they'd rather really go through that than be by themselves, because that is more hurtful, because it draws back to that initial experience that they don't ever want to repeat.
Hmm. Hmm. So part of that conversation, that was a great explanation. Thank you for that, Dr. Saudia Twine. One of the other things that we talked about, what about people who consistently do for others? You don't know how to say no. You say yes to everything. And I'm going to be real transparent and say that is an issue that I have. And one of the things that we were talking about, and I said, I have learned that I'm a people pleaser. And, part of it could be anxious attachment. I sort of think that. Um, and it's not, and I grew up in a two-parent family home, so I know it's a dynamic. However, sometimes I in my mind it's I need to be needed, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I need to be needed because that validates something within me that deals with my own issues. So if someone is dealing with that, what would you suggest to them or how would you help them?
To be honest, I think this is probably the fault in being a therapist or a researcher. I don't have enough information to give an answer, and that's because there are a number of different reasons for that. So, for instance, I've worked with people that felt as if, well, they're adults and they're people pleasers, but in one instance, I have an individual who they felt growing up they were invisible and
Mhm.
their voice was never heard. So now I am with people who I believe that if they need me, then therefore I'm always wanted and desired. So, but it's feeling the the part of them that did not feel important or felt as if they did not matter. Then you
Mhm.
have other people that just have boundary issues. They have never had boundaries established for them.
Mhm.
So there are a number of different examples that I could give. What I normally try to do, no matter what the picture is, if you just think of it this way, most couples have the same argument year after year, same thing,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
different shape. So instead of talking to me about all the different arguments that you've had, I only need to hear one in order to figure out what is the core. Let me figure out what the core is, and then I can stop every future argument about this particular conversation.
Mhm.
So, to go back to answer your question, for me to identify with someone and why are they wanting to be pleasing to other people, for me, I would try to figure out what is the core. And when
Mhm.
it comes to attachment work, the great thing about it is people think you're just this genius. You're like, no, I just did a lot of reading on this one specific area, and I know this one thing in and out. And there are just in essence anywhere from, it can be, because the verbiage changes a bit even though it's the same meaning, so anywhere from 4 to 8 core thoughts or beliefs that exist. And
Mhm.
so if you're just working with someone through their emotions, to me, it's a matter of what is the core belief. Your core belief we identify as a cognitive schema. Your
Mhm.
cognitive schema is how you are seeing yourself as well as how you see other people. And when you know what the core schema is, or that automatic belief of self and other people, then I can get to it. It could be a matter of, let's see, let me go back to anxious, that are most people pleasers because avoidance are not. So
Mhm.
in essence, they will tend to believe that they can't get through to their partner, that they don't matter, they don't come first. They feel as if you can't communicate to another person. They feel as if they try everything that they possibly can in order to get a response from this person. They excite the conversation, they do whatever it takes, but it does not work. In essence, what is just taking place is they're getting to a part of themselves where they are recognizing you're not really seeing me. And in essence, it's identifying one of those core values where they are either feeling unwanted, rejected, not important, invisible, small, broken, frustrated, or shut out. And so because it goes to those same core beliefs, to me, I would have to have a conversation, because
Mhm.
if you identify it incorrectly, then you give the wrong, should I say, response that now requires a different form of action. So people pleasers are, you have to really understand what is the reason behind it. To me, that's a matter of having a conversation that allows you to understand the person a little bit better. And then from there, you hear just certain words that they don't even know that they're repeating over and over again. And when I hear certain words, then I'm able to know, okay, that's what the core issue is. Now, when I talk to you, I know when you're talking to me about your arguments or issues or conflict, or why you don't, should I say, create these strong boundaries. Now I can use those same words to help you to see how it's overflowing in these other areas. So for me, in essence, to kind of summarize this, I need to know what the core is, because the core determines what the response should be. And it's going to vary if it's different from, another core issue that could be identified.
That makes complete sense to me because you got to get to the root cause to actually be able to understand the problem. If you don't understand the root, you can't fix it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Some people, and I'm not saying it's anything wrong with it. Everyone's different. I
Mhm.
just personally believe if I know the core, we can work on that, and you never have to see me again. Whereas, you want to spend your money on other things. You don't have to spend it on me. And so, if we get to the core, we can fix it, and then you can go on and have a wonderful life, as opposed to putting a band aid on something that is really causing you to bleed out. You can't put a band aid on that.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. So, what happens if you are with a partner and they have a low self esteem and they're always people pleasing, yet won't acknowledge that there's an issue and you're trying to work through it? They won't go to counseling, because I talk to people and they're like, oh, I'm trying to get my husband to go to counseling. He doesn't want to go to counseling because he feels like counseling is not something that we need. I try to get him to pray about it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What would you suggest to someone who is frustrated and really doesn't know? Because I tell some people, I said, sometimes you got to work on yourself
Mhm.
before you can work on both of you.
True. That's true. I would ask, in what ways it's shaping up. If it's formulating in arguments, and that's where it is frustrating that partner the most, then I would give a response for that. If it's just day-to-day conversation and you're in essence trying to be a counselor on your own time, a lay counselor, then my response would be to change how you're showing up. In essence, it's really about survival of the fittest. It goes back to science in this regard, where we match with someone that we believe is a good pair for us. So if I'm anxious attachment, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the
Mhm.
majority of relationships are 70% anxious attachment that will pair with a person that is avoiding attachment, and that's a female male relationship. If it is a woman who is avoiding attachment, they're only 30% of the population. And then the male who is anxious, they are also 30% of the population. So that's kind of flip flop, is very rare, but it does take place. But in
Mhm.
essence, that point I'm trying to make is that most people are going to pair with the opposite. An anxious will get with an avoiding person. So the things that we do based on our attachment style really causes us to show up differently, but we're
Mhm.
saying the exact same thing. So if I'm anxious and I'm trying to reach out to my partner, this is the person that's going to text you 50,000 times about this one situation. They're going to email you, leave a message, whatever it is. It comes across to the avoiding person or even other people as, why are you stalking? Why are you belaboring this point? In their head, they don't see that. What they see is, you didn't understand me the way that I explained it the first 40 times. So maybe if I explain it to you a different way, you'll get it. So let me explain it to you this 41st time. They don't see it as being overbearing or too much or overwhelming. They see it as, I'm just trying to be heard and understood. And the only way I can get that is to express myself to you. So let's kind of break this down a bit so you can get a clearer example.
Mhm.
Everybody who's a parent has had their child crying, and their child has cried, and you're going to be one of three types of parents. You're going to look at that child and either let them cry it out, or you're going to look at the child, pick them up and hold them to soothe them, to calm them down.
Mhm.
The people who look at their child and let them cry it out, and they do that consistently, they are building an avoidant attachment individual, telling them you have to figure out how to soothe and calm your own emotions to regulate your own emotions. For someone who does that sometimes and other times they pick them up, that's when they're building an anxious attachment. They're telling them sometimes I'll be here, sometimes I won't.
Mhm.
The parent that picks them up all the time, more than likely they had a parent themselves or a grandparent say, "You're going to spoil that baby. You
Yep.
don't need to do that." No, what you're building is secure attachment. You're telling them that I hear you, I see you.
Mhm.
And as a child, we cry, we whine, we put up our arms to say, pick me up. As an
Mhm.
adult, it's the exact same thing. We just figure out different ways because now we can actually use words. So, as
Mhm.
an adult, an anxious person is going to criticize, they're going to complain a lot, they're going to blame you, they're going to be controlling. Whereas an avoidant person, they can't handle all of that. So what do? They shut down. They numb out. They avoid the conversation. They do these cloak and dagger moves. I'm gonna go over here, and when I come back, maybe you will have forgotten we were arguing. They're both saying the exact same thing. The anxious person is saying, I need to be connected to you. So I'm going to communicate to you in the hopes that you will hear me. And when you hear me, that will get us back on track to being happy and in love again. But the
Mhm.
way that they do it, their partner cannot take it because it is the opposite of what they had growing up. And so, because of that, that avoidant person, they're saying to themselves, I don't like this conflict. I don't like arguing. I can't deal with this. I'm going to go over here. And it looks like they are purposefully ignoring or avoiding their partner. And instead, what they're doing is all these emotions are surfacing that they never learned how to deal with. So, the
Mhm.
only way I can get through this is to sit down. When we've done it, a lot of people have done this before. You've had a conversation with someone, noticing you were getting emotional, about to cry, the frog is coming up in your throat, and you just pushed it right on back down. The
Right.
avoidant person does this regularly. You don't even know that they are stressed, that they are they're technically anxious. It's just a different form of anxiousness.
Mhm.
They're very cold in how they look. But underneath, it's like an iceberg. All this stuff is happening and you can't see it. So they need to go and sit down, be by themselves, decompress, think about it. I'm sorry, you've probably been there. Every wife, I think, has been there to some point, shape, or form, because you'll have a conversation with your spouse, think they did not hear a word you said. And
Mhm.
next thing you'll know, 2 days later, 2 hours later, 2 weeks later, they will come back in the room. You have
Mhm.
not talked about this, and they will pick up like you talked about this 2 minutes ago. And you'll
Yeah.
be like, wait a minute, we talked about that 2 weeks ago. That
Exactly.
and that's because the entire time they were processing that conversation, they heard you, they're honoring and respecting you, but the way that they do it is different. They have to go off and think about it. And because they're men, they need to come back with an answer, a solution, because they believe that's what their job is. And if
Mhm.
I don't have an answer, I'm not doing my part. And
Mhm.
so when they come back with that, that's what they're trying to say. So everybody is doing the same thing. They just do it extremely different and opposite of the other person. And I think it's a matter of, once we understand and know that, then we can respond the right way. So, yet again, long winded, going back to your answer, the best way to approach an anxious or an avoidant person is to be consistent in showing up emotionally for them. And I use an acronym called R: being available, responsive, and engaged. You have to be emotionally available to them when they need it, every time they need it. You have to show that you are there. Just like that baby that's crying and that mommy's picking that baby up, that mommy is always there. She's showing, I am available to you. when
Mhm.
when that kid grows up and now they're trying to talk to you about their friends, and you are being there physically for them, showing up to games or different things like that, you're proving that, yes, I see and hear you, I'm available for you. And
Mhm.
then you're responding to that. You're showing them that a response comes behind that. And everybody has done this when they first started dating their partner. You're having those conversations. No, you hang up. No, no, you hang up. No, no. And then you're talking on the phone for 6 hours. you're enjoying one another, you're engaging in the conversation. If guy is trying to date someone and she's like, oh, the only time I have available is 4:45 a.m. when I go to the gym. Well, guess what? At 4:30, he's in the parking lot at the gym because he's trying to, be a part of her world. So he's showing himself to be engaged. And
Mhm.
when we are in engaged, we're doing available, responsive, and engaged. We're doing all of the elements that are identifying with secure attachment. We just don't know how to do that consistently.
Excellent answer. And all of that made perfect sense. Okay, but it jogged a thought for me, Dr. Saudia Twine. So narcissists,
Okay.
how do they play into avoiding anxious tests? You giving me that look like, oh, here you go with another this topic.
No, it's just that, oh gosh, narcissists. Oh, we're just getting into an entirely different area when it comes
Okay.
to a narcissist. So, and a narcissist, in essence, because a lot of people use the term and
Hmm.
they use it in error, but it's really a deep need, not just an anxious person who has a desire to want to be seen or known or be important or matter. A narcissist, especially if they are clinically diagnosed with narcissist personality disorder, this is a person who has an inflated sense of importance, self-importance. And because of that, it's a mental condition where they have a deep need for excessive attention or
Hmm.
excessive admiration, that you're going to see them having troubled relationships over the course of their adulthood. And then on top of that, they lack empathy for others. So if I'm anxious attachment people don't lack empathy. They are very empathetic. I love anxious attachment individuals because they are some of the most loving and caring individuals that you'll see. They know how to definitely give love. They have mastered that very well. They just don't know how to communicate that at all times, but they definitely know how to love and have empathy. The narcissist does not have empathy. So even though they mimic one another when it comes to this insatiable need for attention or admiration, they differ from that empathy aspect because the anxious person has it, the narcissist does not.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So now I want to move on to the third part of our topic. How do we learn how to put our needs first? And I'm asking this from a counseling perspective because I'm sure you get a lot of women who will say, I do this for my kids, I do this for my husband, I do this, I don't have time, da 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 da. How do I fit me in there? What do you say to couples, probably more so to women who are struggling to find some type of independence or outside interest for themselves? Because you talked about if your spouse can't be with you all the time. And my husband, that's one of the things that I always stress. You have to have friends. I have to have friends. We can't be together all the time. It's good for some people. It's not good for me. I need space sometimes, and I need you to be okay with that. And he is. And I know that some women, when I talk to them, that's something that they struggle with.
Okay. I think overall, when we're looking at pretty much trying to figure out how to help them to develop self-care, one, just recognizing certain signs. So one of the things that I'll find out is where are they in this whole process. So
Mhm.
if they are hiding in the bathroom, hiding in the closet, driving around the neighborhood, sitting in the driveway or sitting in the garage, that's letting you know you're trying to pump yourself up to go to your second job, which is your full-time job, which is mommyhood, right?
Mhm.
And that means you are so accustomed to having someone pull on you that you just need some time for yourself. So if you're experiencing, any of those or any other things that you could be doing in the hopes of preparing for the next phase of life when you come home and having others pull on you, you have to develop some me time. So you have to start off small. Mothers are feeling very guilty when they do that. And so I like to check in. I always ask moms, when you go to the grocery store, what snack do you get for yourself? What? Huh? Oh no,
Right.
I
Nothing.
always eat my babies, blah blah blah. And I'm like, So if you can't get something for you that's solely just yours, I think this is commercial. I think it's a Milano cookie commercial.
Mhm.
Mom's in the bathroom, you know, like, oh, in here, right? And she's indulging in a moment, but it's so true. That's why it's a great commercial and it's able to stick with people. One, it may be 5 minutes, but it's her 5 minutes and she's sticking to it. So I think one, we need to recognize that we don't have this. Two, we need to create boundaries. And I think if COVID has taught anyone anything, it's developing healthy boundaries.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you have to start there. And it doesn't have to be something big. People feel like they need to have an entire day by themselves. If you have toddlers, you can't have that. But when
Right.
you put the babies to bed, guess what? You probably get, hour or so before it's time for you to go to bed. Or maybe you ask, your spouse, your partner, your mom, or whoever's helping you, you know what? Baby wakes up at such and such time. I'm going to wake up half an hour earlier, and that's just for me, or 15 minutes. Just, I don't know, whatever it is, you start small and then
Mhm.
you build in increments from there. And
Mhm.
it's just a matter of having the moment, because when we have it, we can look forward to it. Like, oh, at 3 o'clock, oh my gosh, I have 30 minutes to solely just for me. So it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you something to prepare for. And then it also begins setting the stage for developing boundaries so that you can build more time into this as your children age, as well as how you're able to navigate through your day.
And self-care is more than just spa visits and hot baths and whatever else that we say, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It could be whatever that person desires. Everyone is different. And I think it's really recognizing what it is that you like, what it is that you haven't had time for, that you used to enjoy doing, and whatever that looks like. And I remember I had a supervisor that used to ask me, well, what do I do for self care? And I was like, oh, I nap. She got tired of hearing that. And I was like, look here, lady, you do what works for you. That is what I enjoy. I'm a happier person when I get a nap. No nap, cranky. You don't want that. That's what makes me happy. So you can't judge me on what makes me happy. Now, I'm not saying people need to go get high. I'm not saying that.
Well,
But
I hear that on the Kim B. Davis show. We didn't
right,
say get high.
right. But you have to do what works for you.
And that is a great suggestion. One of the things that a therapist told me right after I was diagnosed with postpartum depression, and he said, "You have high functioning anxiety." And I said, "Yeah, I'm anxious a lot about a lot of different things." And he said, "All the things that we're talking about," he said, "are completely normal." And he asked a question very similar to what you asked the mother. And you said, "What do you buy for yourself in the store?" He said, "Well, what do you do for yourself during the day?" And I sort of looked at him like, "Didn't I just tell you my schedule? All the things that I have to do?" And he said, "Yes, you managed to do all those things. Where are you in that day?" And I looked at him like, "I don't have time." He said, "You got to make time." He said, "You make time for everything else. I need you to put yourself into your own schedule for 20 to 30 minutes a day." And we came up with, he was like, "Do you like to walk?" I said, "I do. I love to walk. I just don't have time to walk." He said, "Okay, so we got to schedule it." So he was like, "Pull your calendar out. Let's look at it." And we started talking about it. And I was like, "Okay, I'll try it." And in my head, I was thinking, he is nuttier than a fruitcake because I already told him I don't have time. And the first day I started walking, I walked for 20 minutes. Dr. Saudia, it was heaven. I was like, there's no one asking me anything. No
Mm.
one's saying, "Mommy." Nobody's pulling on me like, "Pick me up, pick me up." And that 20, 30 minutes turned into a 90-minute walk every day. And
Oh,
so it's something that I try to not do, or try to not miss for myself. That's my thing. So where the nap is for you, the walk is for me. It makes me feel good. I feel better when I don't get my walk. Everybody knows I didn't get my walk today because I am cranky.
okay.
So I completely understand that. Tell us, so you've given us so much information on how to recognize what avoidant, what anxious attachment, what secure and insecure attachment is. If we think that we're having trouble, what would be the one thing, if there's one thing that you would give us that would distinguish it to tell us to look out for help or to go seek help? Is there any one thing that's like a big button? You giving me that look again?
Well, it's just because it's going to look different based off of the attachment style. So I'll just phrase
Okay.
it like this. If you recognize that your partner is dissatisfied, and in what that's going to look like, avoidance will be able to live happily in a relationship where there's not much conversation going on, not much emotional sharing. They'll be happy. But if they're paired with someone who is anxious, then this is what I would suggest. The anxious person is the one that calls for counseling. The anxious person is the one who is dissatisfied, that wants more communication, that wants to be closer because they actually need that. The avoidant person needs it. They just learn to live without it and then to find what they need outside of a romantic or marital relationship. So if you feel like you're having the same argument, we don't talk, we can't communicate, you always shut down, or you feel as if, your spouse or your partner is always, trying to control you or criticizes you or blames you for things. If you notice you're having those types of arguments over and over, that's the telltale sign to let you know, all right, let me dial it back a bit. And in order to dial it back, I think you need to approach the conversations differently. And Dr. John Gottman came up with these tactics identified as the four horsemen. And it just depends on where you may experience this in your conversations with your partner. So if you feel like it identifies as your partner criticizes you a lot, or you feel like you're defending yourself a lot, or maybe conversations are just really heated. And so because of that, maybe we're saying some things that aren't so kind. Or maybe you feel as if, okay, my partner is shutting down, or you notice that your partner is saying you shut down too much. I would try to give you these four things. So in essence, if you feel that criticism is an issue, combat that with just starting the conversation off softly. How you start a conversation is how it's going to end. If you start on 2,000, it's going to end on 5,000. So don't start so high. Start softly and gently, and then it allows you to be able to be true and honest in yourself and your own feelings using I words, because it allows you to be able to be honest of who you are and how you're feeling, and it takes away from complaining or blaming the other person. If defensiveness is the issue, then I would say if your partner is doing that, then cut them off at the beginning. Listen to them. And I tell men this all the time. I'll say, you know what? If you feel like that's what's happening, cut her off at minute 2. You don't have 20 minutes for this conversation over and over again. At the second minute, she's already identified one thing that you know that she's right about. Stop her dead in her tracks and say, you know what, babe? Yeah, I'm going to work on that. And I know you identify some other things, but let me just focus on that and let's come back and talk about it. And you tell me how well I'm doing on that. On that thing, take responsibility for it and then actually work on it. And that will help her to see that you listen. But in the same sense, she won't have that argument go on and on and on either. And then I think if it's those high heated conversations, or should I say heated fellowship, where you're sincerely arguing to a higher level, that's when you really have to stop discussing or describing your partner and totally just discuss your own feelings and identify your own needs. And I like to say that from the aspect of, let's talk about my feelings, because if I talk about my thoughts, you can come at me with my thoughts, but you can't really come at me when I'm telling you how something makes me feel. You can tell me I'm wrong for how I'm thinking. Well, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean to say it like that, but how it makes me feel, no, I didn't do that. Well, no, that is what happened. And now we have to talk about that. And generally, if a
Mm.
person loves you, they will not continue on with that. They'll try to stop it. And then the last thing is, if your partner is shutting down a lot and that's too overwhelming for you, notice it. You know when somebody gets that glassy look in their eye where they have left the building.
Mhm.
You know when that happens in a conversation. Stop before then. You've identified your point and just simply be like, you know what? Let's talk about this later. You take some time to think about it. You go off, sit down, and we'll talk about it later. I kind of already mentioned guys are automatically going to think about it and come back to you. So just go ahead and give them the out. They'll come back to you later because they know it's a heated issue with you. Just give them that moment and they'll come back to you about it. So that's the way I was able to get everybody in through one of those 4 points.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine. Tell us how we can reach you and how we can find you on social media.
So I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Eros Meets Agape. I try to drop little tidbits for relationship in my daily communication or post from there. But I also do a subscription box. It's called the Next Box, and it really helps people that are trying to improve their attachment issues to what we identify as earned secure attachment, because you can't do it from childhood, so you have to work your way towards it. But it teaches people how to better manage their emotions regardless of their attachment style. So all of that information, along with the book that I have, if you're just a reader, which is Get Naked, Learning How to Love Again Without Fear, you can find all of that on my website at agape.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine. We hope you will join us again and talk more about relationships and mental behavior and help us towards our good mental well being, which is what we look forward to because we all want to be healed.
Most definitely. I would love to. It's one of my favorite things to do. So no problem at all. I enjoy being here. And thanks for having me again.
Thank you again. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Kim B. Davis Show. You know, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, and it's under Kimberly Bachelor Davis. Bachelor is spelled BATCHELOR. You can find out more information about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. You can see this show on youtube.com/ Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can also listen and tune in on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. Thank you again for tuning in. And as always, remember, be magnificent.